When it comes to selling ball pythons, it is fairly common for people to look at Morph Market and identify the lowest price for a given combo. And then what they do is that they take their animal and they price it just a little bit lower than that, with the idea being that anybody who is shopping on price is going to buy their animals first, and therefore they'll be able to sell it faster, have less overhead, and ultimately make a higher profit margin versus holding on to the animal in the hopes that they will get the full fair market value. But does this practice actually contribute to price crashes and the price declines of projects over time? Or are smaller breeders not producing enough volume to really make a difference? And finally, how do auctions fit into the entire economics of ball python prices? My name's Steven with Leviathan Snakes, and let's get to it. Before we get into our core questions, we need to kind of talk about some definitions, or at least my definitions for some of the words that I'm going to use. And the very first one is supply and demand. And for the most part, we're using a simplified version of supply and demand, where what we are doing is we are looking at the balance between the available supply, specifically on Morph Market, though Morph Market is not the entire reptile hobby, and the demand, the amount of people who want to buy that specific morph or that specific combo. And the reason why it's super important to understand this is because the imbalance between supply and demand is what creates price changes. If you have an oversupply, if there's more supply than there is demand available to buy that animal or buy that product at that given price point, the prices will subsequently fall. And if you have it inversed, where you have an imbalance of demand and there's not enough supply, over time the prices for that specific combo, that specific gene, will end up rising. And I think that this is the key to everything that we are going to be talking about, because Morph Market makes it where we are able to see the relative supply and the relative demand given how many are selling at any given time fairly easily, so people use Morph Market as almost their starting point on what to base their prices off of. The next concept that we need to define is the fair market value. And when we are talking about the fair market value, what we are trying to say is this is the lowest point where multiple different breeders are pricing their animals, so that way if anybody were to come into the market right now with no connections and they just wanted to buy that exact combo, they would be able to find at least a decent amount of supply for it at that given threshold. And that is the fair market value. The third thing that we need to discuss is the idea of discounts. So there's lots of different reasons why a breeder or a seller would discount an animal from the fair market value. One of the most common ones that is talked about is that the breeder is fairly new, they don't have a customer base built up, and they don't have very much brand value. And because of this, they don't feel that they can price their exact animal for the full fair market value, because realistically, there is some risk that the customer is taking on them. And this risk is that it's a brand new breeder and it might be a scam, or it's a brand new breeder and maybe that breeder isn't going to be around in 2 years, and if there's a problem, they're not going to be able to support the customer like the customer would get if they went from a really big brand that's been around for decades. So this is one reason why a newer breeder might discount their price from the fair market value, and in order to make sure that they are providing adequate value to the customer and trying to sell their animal first. But it's not just new breeders that are providing discounts. In fact, I think the entire hobby is providing discounts. Everybody knows that if you end up buying multiple different animals from the same breeder over and over and over again, it is very, very likely that that breeder is going to be very appreciative of the repeat business, and therefore on future purchases, they're going to discount the price for you and give you a good deal, so that way you are getting more value for each subsequent purchase that you are making from them. Not so much on Morph Market, but there's also the idea of a show discount, where it is somewhat of a timed sale, where if somebody were willing to purchase an animal in person at that show in full, that they would get a better deal than if they bought it off the open market on Morph Market. All of these reasons for discounts are 1000% valid, and they're used, again, all across the industry. There are two that I specifically want to talk about, and that is the subprime combo discount and the fast sale discount. So when it comes to the subprime combo discount, this is a situation where the breeder knows that that exact animal might have some really valuable genes in it, but it also has a gene that most people in that project are going to want to breed out. And when you are going to have to breed something out, that means that half of all of the babies that it's going to make, if it's an incomplete dominant trait, probably are not going to be holdbacks unless there's absolutely no other choice for that breeder. So it minimizes the usefulness of that specific combo, and this is why you can see specific combos with genes like spider, or in some instances pastel, some instances cinnamons, or in some instances even the bell complex can create situations where the breeder is discounting the price because the breeder knows that there is somewhat diminished ability to use that animal long term, and realistically, once the person who buys it is able to get a holdback without that gene, their animal is going to be moved on to somebody else. The last aspect that I want to talk about on the discount side, because it's going to be the basis for later on in this video, is the idea that somebody needs to make a fast sale. And this is the key, is that they know that they have an animal that is worth, let's say, $2,000. But if they try to wait for the right customer to come and pay the full $2,000, that might be months before it happens. And oftentimes, if there's a lot of competition in that specific combo, in that specific project, they know if they have to wait months for somebody to come up and sell it, there's a very, very high likelihood that other people are going to come in and undercut them first, and that they might not make that sale at all for that price point. So because of this, they essentially jump the gun and they immediately discount the price because they're trying to sell it first. But what this can do is it can completely change that threshold for the fair market value, because if enough people come in on that new lowest price, it can create a new baseline, and therefore that no longer is that project, no longer is that combo worth $2,000, maybe now it's worth $1,500. Very quickly, before we get into the questions that we outlined in the intro, I do want to talk about price premiums, because there are a few factors that contribute to price premiums. And one is that a specific animal, one exact animal, might be an absolutely amazing example of that specific morph, of that specific combo. And it's very common for people to put price premiums on these animals. So even though the fair market value might have been $2,000, it might be one of the best examples of that combo that has ever existed, and it's very obvious to see in all of the pictures with it. So in this situation, instead of it being $2,000, it might get priced at $2,500. Now, the other reasons why there might be a price premium is that it is from a brand name breeder. And this isn't to say that smaller breeders or newer breeders can't do price premiums, but part of the premium that you are paying for a brand like Brock Wagner Reptiles or Bob Vu or Canova is that you know that those people have been in the hobby for years and years and years, and they have a big enough operation where you can trust that if something went wrong, they would be able to take care of you. And because you have that implicit backing from their brand, it does serve to provide additional value, and therefore it can serve to provide a little bit of a premium on the prices of the animals that they produce. One additional premium that I think we see quite a bit, especially now that genetic testing is so popular, is that people will take the cost of the additional service that they're doing, in this case, testing a pos het animal to see if they are 100% het. And if they do prove to be heterozygous, it is super, super common now to price that animal as 100% het rather than the pos het price. And I think that this is a incredibly common, incredibly easy way to justify a higher price, because you are taking the extra effort, you are going the extra mile in order to figure out exactly what that animal is. And quick plug, because huge shout out to RGI for sponsoring the video, sponsoring our channel, and they do amazing things in the shed testing realm. Head over to Morph Market or for Clutch and check them out. The last one that I want to talk about is the holdback premium. And this is where somebody doesn't actually want to sell their animal. They would be completely fine to grow that animal up and breed it for themselves. And if they did this, they have no skin off their back. So a holdback premium is essentially the price where if somebody really wanted to pay it, they would part with that animal, but realistically, they don't really want to sell it at all, and they really just want to show it off to people in the project or on Morph Market. So because of this, the holdback premiums often are way pricier than any of the other premiums because the person doesn't really expect to sell it. But these holdback premiums can be really, really important for helping establish the value of a project, even if you don't have any real intention of selling that animal. With all the setup out of the way, now we can talk about the real topic, and that is, can a newer breeder, a smaller breeder, really have any impact on the market at all? So I want to talk about a situation that would create a price crash. And let's say that we have a combo, and I'll pick on Sunset on it because Sunset is my favorite morph. So let's say that you have Sunset animals. And when you very first start producing Sunset animals, they are going for, let's say, $3,000. And you post your Sunset animal for sale, but for various different reasons, maybe you don't have a very big brand, so people would rather buy from somebody who's more established in the project than that newer breeder. Or that it is a rough economic time and people are not really wanting to invest $3,000 on essentially a luxury item because snakes, reptiles are not a necessity. So whatever the reason is, that animal that you listed for $3,000 doesn't sell right away, and somebody else comes in with a Sunset, and they see that the lowest price on Morph Market right now is $3,000, and they know all of those same context factors that we just discussed. So with that, they're like, oh, well, I want to sell my animal first, so they price it at $2,500, and maybe it doesn't sell then. And then the next person comes in and they price it at $2,000 because again, they're trying to make a quick sale. And then somebody else comes in and they see that there is one at $2,000, one at $2,500, one at $3,000. None of them have sold, and they're like, oh man, there's starting to be a lot of supply in this area and nobody's buying them yet. So then they come in at $1,000 and then it sells. And then at that point in time, other people know that, oh, people are willing to buy this animal at $1,000, and other people start dropping their prices very, very quickly, and it creates the situation where if you bought in at $3,000 and now everybody's pricing them at $1,000, it feels like that you lost 2/3 of the value before you are even able to produce an animal. And this is a situation that causes a price crash. On the inverse, we want to talk about how prices can rise. And let's say, again, using Sunset, that you have an animal and you post it up at $3,000. And let's say that somebody comes out with this absolutely amazing, insane Sunset combo, and it convinces a bunch of people that, oh wow, that's the direction, that's the future of the ball python hobby. So at that point in time, a bunch of people start coming in and they start buying up all of the different Sunset animals that are available on the market. So the ones that are at $3,000 get sold, and now the cheapest price is $4,000, and those ones get sold, and so on and so forth, until it gets to the point where when you go back to post your next animal and you realize that the floor has changed. No longer is the base $3,000 because so many people bought those animals in a short amount of time. Now the cheapest is $5,000, that's what you post them at. And that is a situation where, again, the imbalance between the demand and the small amount of supply that was available had created a situation to increase the prices. Now, this isn't very common, and in fact, I think that this most commonly happens when there is a really, really cool gene that hasn't been worked very much, so there's low supply on the market, and once it gets all gobbled up, the few people who do have animals in that project are essentially able to set the price that they think that that project is valued for, and if it sells at that point, they have successfully created a new floor. But if there is a ton of supply in that project, it's very, very unlikely that any 1, 2, or even 3 small level breeders are going to have any real ability to influence the price for that specific project because they just don't produce enough animals to raise the floor. Once their animal is sold, it's gone. So, auctions. How do auctions fit into this? And I'll go ahead and give a spoiler. I think that auctions help out the ball python market so much, because what ends up happening is if you are in a situation where you are wanting to sell an animal on a discount specifically for the reason that you want to make a fast sale, an auction is the best way to go about this, both for the seller and for the overall market. Because when people are going in and they're trying to price their animal, they aren't going to active auction listings where you only see the bids. And realistically, everybody knows that if there's 2 days left on an auction, the bid that it's at doesn't reflect the value of that animal in the slightest. And even if an animal on auction goes for significantly less than the full retail value, that doesn't mean that that project or that combo is worth that amount of money, because maybe there just wasn't that many people on the auctions when that auction ended. So for all of these different reasons, the reason why I think that it is way better to actually auction off the animals that you would have posted on a discount, because you get to put them in a situation where you know you're going to end up selling that animal within 2, 3, however many days that you set the auction for. And in this situation, it is out of the regular market where people are basing their values off of. In fact, oftentimes what happens when people look at auctions, they will see what is that exact combo going for if they were going to buy it now, if that makes sense. And then they are making their bids with that knowledge in mind. So on the open market, if the price is $3,000 and that animal, that combo is up for auction, they might not be willing to pay $3,000 for that animal on auction, but maybe they're willing to pay $2,500 if it gets all the way up to that point, because they still got a deal in their mind. In addition, what this does is it makes sure that there isn't a listing going on Morph Market that's staying there for months and months and months at $2,500, because once that auction is done, that animal is off of Morph Market and you can't go back and see exactly what was the price that it sold for on the auction, and people aren't using that data in order to establish this is what the floor of this project is. So subsequently, what ends up happening is that the animals that are left on listings are predominantly from the people who are willing to wait for the right buyer, and the animals on auctions are those from the people who really just want to move that exact snake. And I think that this is a great compromise, and it helps out both parties because it helps keep the prices a little bit higher rather than the straight race to the bottom, and it moves animals for the people who need them to move fast. So I think that overall, I really, really like the impact that auctions have made on the ball python market, and I think that it is going to continue to do really, really good things for it. So with all of this said, I think that smaller hobby level breeders don't really have the volume to influence the market in any significant way, but collectively, as a bunch of hobby level breeders are essentially feeding off of each other, that 1000% does impact the market. So I think that if there is a situation where you really need to move an animal quickly, but you don't really care that much about the price that you get for it, I think an auction is a far, far better thing for both you individually and the overall market than simply putting up that listing a little bit cheaper than everybody else. Anyways, we hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, please don't forget to hit the like button, leave a comment, and subscribe, and we will see you next week.